Welcome, everyone. I was just getting ready to start this and was telling Leland how there would definitely be people waiting in the waiting room. I am always so impressed at the punctuality of folks that are able to be ready for a webinar and like in the waiting room when it starts or even before it starts, because I am definitely usually not that person, to no one's surprise. Welcome, everyone. A lot of new names here. I am very excited. There's a lot of folks here who I don't know if I recognize your names. If I do, I apologize, but it's always exciting to see new people and make new friends. As you come in, what we would love for you to do is to drop your name in the chat and what organization you're with or where you are in the country or all three. It's nice to get a feel for where everyone's tuning in from. We're going to give it a few minutes for folks to come in before we start. Well, even though I see some new names, I see a lot of old friends in terms of organizations. So it's nice to see everybody. Welcome. Ithaca. I love Ithaca. It's gorgeous. All right. Nice to see folks. For those of you that are just coming in, I think probably you'll see everyone else doing it. So it'll be self-evident, but drop your name and your organization and where in the country that you're tuning in from. Hi, Crystal. Hi, Aubrey. All right. We will give it a few more minutes to give folks a chance to come in, to find their link and get situated, get in the door. It is 2 o'clock in the afternoon and it feels like it. At least it is here. I don't know about the rest of you. All right, welcome folks. Give it another minute. Hi, Lisa. Feels like 8 a.m. Fair enough. All right. I guess I'd rather it be 2 p.m. than 8 a.m. for sure. So welcome, everyone. Give it another minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. Nice to see you all. Thanks everyone for joining us today. If you haven't put your name and your organization and where you're calling in from in the chat, go ahead and do that if you feel comfortable sharing. We have folks from all over the place. I love to see it. All right. With that, we will go ahead and I will get us started. Thank you all for joining us for our September webinar. This month, we're talking about food distribution and growing that food distribution, in particular, and particularly in growing your impact and in how you are working to create a really impactful distribution program. Our guest host today, or actually, I guess before I introduce Leland, we literally went through these slides like 5 minutes ago, and I'm already jumping the gun. Just a few reminders. We are recording this, and it will be available after the fact. So if you missed something or want to go back and refer to one of the slides, we will share that within the next couple of days. We will answer questions at the end. If you could drop those questions into the Q&A, not into the chat. Sometimes the chat goes by really fast and it's hard to pull questions out of there. So if you could drop your questions into Q&A, we will get to those at the end. And at the end of the webinar, we will provide links to you to request a follow-up meeting. And then I say for our next webinar, but actually it won't be for our next webinar. It will be for our conference, registering for our conference. So we won't be doing a webinar next month. We will be very busy putting on our Food Rescue Hero or Food Rescue Conference. So, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the webinar. I'm super excited to welcome Leland Scales joining us today. Leland and I are, I think, the two remaining folks that have been with 412 Food Rescue since the early days. And 412 Food Rescue is the food recovery organization founded in Pittsburgh in 2015 that designed the Food Rescue Hero app. And we did it basically because we needed a tool. Leland has been with us forever. He is our nonprofit partner management. He really excels in building the relationships with our nonprofit partners. And I'm so excited to have him here to talk a little bit about this today. And I want to start with sort of where you came from and what you were doing, some of the things that you were doing before you started working with 412 Food Rescue. Because when I think about, your community involvement, I think about the community garden that you started in Swissvale. And Swissvale is the community outside of Pittsburgh where you live. And I know you're super dedicated to it. But I wanted to ask you to tell me the story of why did you start that garden? Is that sort of what got you interested in food and food recovery, or how did that all come about?
That's a good question. So it's funny because at this point, I had never grown anything a day in my life. So I was just starting grad school and I was really focused on the corporate side. I was trying to mesh my my culinary degree with my business marketing degree because they had a food marketing major. But the first week of school, they decided they were going to take all of the new cohort out to visit all of the like community gardens, community farms around the greater Pittsburgh area. And, I kind of got to see, the impact that these spaces had on the communities, especially communities that were suffering from blight and that had been deteriorating over the years. So I was like, man, that could be something that I can really see myself doing, to kind of, build up and help spawn community development in my community. So I really just started like asking questions, just trying to figure out, if that's something that the community would want, if it's something that they would see as a benefit. And it kind of just went from there.
And I love the fact that you didn't go in with a preconceived notion that this is what the community needed, that you kind of saw the impact this was having in other places, and then checked in with your community to see if this is something that would actually help, again, as opposed to just thinking, okay, well, that's going to be great. How does that methodology inform how you approach partnerships and distribution partnerships at 412 Food Rescue?
I think it really informs it because in order to really get an understanding for how much or if what you're trying to do will have an impact on the community, you must first ask the community what it needs. And you got to figure out if what your idea, what you're thinking about doing to have an impact on the community is really something that they'll benefit from. So I think, taking that approach early on really helped me in my approach to nonprofit partnerships and the relationships that I built within 412 Food Rescue, because it's really important for me to not try to do the work for them, but to really have them inform me on what they need me to do, like what my presence is here. How can I help you, serve your community and build up and bring in resources that you need in your community? So I think it really helped inform that and really allowed me to go the extra step in building that relationship.
And I think that's such a key point too, because a lot of times when we approach working with food donors, for example, we know the food donors are doing something for us, right? Like we need that food to distribute. They're seen as giving us something. A lot of times with our distribution partners, it's easy to think, okay, well, with the roles are reversed. We're giving them something, right? They should be grateful, or we don't need to do any work because we're taking them something they need. But you're really approaching it from the opposite end, where you're thinking, okay, what do they need and how can we help them, right? How can we partner with them to provide that community with what it needs, not what we think it needs, but what they're telling us that they need.
Absolutely.
Um, and so I know you talk a lot about building trust and going in and having that first conversation with the organizations is the first step in that journey. But if you could talk a little bit more about how you build trust over time, number one, and number two, why that's important.
So how I typically go about trying to build trust is and I'll say it again, and I'll probably reiterate it multiple times throughout this, is really like relationship building, like not going in with the approach or that I'm doing them a favor, or that, you know what I mean, they should hail my praises for coming in to try to help them out of their situation, or that I'm some kind of savior. I come in as a friend, as a family member, as, you know what I mean, as, just somebody trying to get to know them. So every time that I would be in the community, we're having regular conversations, not just about the food that I'm bringing, but about their lives, how they're doing. You know what I mean? How's everything going? If the holiday just passed, how was your holiday? Just really trying to become a part of their lives, to where, if I hadn't been there for a while, they're like, hey, where have you been? How have you, and they're asking questions about me. So now, we have that kind of back and forth type of conversation. And then from that, there's more trust that's built in those conversations, where, early on, they might just take everything because they're worried that, they might not get any more, or we might push them to the back of the list and things like that. But as the relationship continues to grow, they might say, you can cut back on some of the lettuce. We're throwing a lot of it away, or, you're bringing a lot of bread, and, you know what I mean? It's wonderful, but it's more than we can use. And then the reality of the whole situation comes out, and everybody is, they become more comfortable with being honest with you about what their needs actually are. And then from that standpoint, we can then switch or change or adjust whatever we're bringing them, and then we can take things to other communities that can use them.
This is such a critical point, because I know that some folks are probably thinking, well, that's what we do because I like the people, right? I like the people that I work with. And you're somebody that really naturally connects with the folks that you're interacting with, right? That's just you being your authentic self, is going in and caring about people. And a lot of folks that are in this work, that's fair. That is exactly, who their authentic self is. You're going to create that connection when you go into a community. But let's not lose sight of the fact that that's strategically important. So if that's not your nature, right? Or if you're doing it just willy-nilly because it feels good, or that's who you are, uh, let's focus in a little bit and think about that as a strategy for really understanding what our impact is and where we're falling short and where we can increase it. In particular, I love that you brought up the fact of like, well, maybe we are throwing some of the food away. And that's the question nobody wants to ask in food recovery, right? But that is the question that we do often get asked from our donors or from people who are wondering how this all works is, but do they eat it? When you take food to a community, are they using it? And we can assume all day long that they are, but the fact of the matter is they might not be. Getting that information, if we really, really want to have a real impact and end food waste, getting that information on when organizations are maybe throwing away some of the food because we're giving them too much is critical to creating operations that are actually having the impact we want them to have. So I want to then take this out to another level, sort of take it up to the 10,000 foot view or whatever, and talk about what impact is. And I mean, you and I have had many, many conversations over the last 8, 9 years about the work that we do. And I think, especially folks in this work, sometimes take it for granted that everybody understands what impact is, and don't necessarily think critically about what it is and how we can then use that to be strategic. So I want to go back to a conversation we had. This was fun. This was funny. When we were a small group and there was a group of very passionate, dedicated individuals, including you and myself, doing the food recovery. I remember one day we got into an almost fight in the office about what donations we should be taking and what donations we shouldn't be taking. And so, for example, should we take fast food? Should we take donuts as a rescue, as a donation? And the group fell really, I think, on two sides, some saying yes, absolutely, we need to keep it out of the landfill, and some saying no, it's not good for people. And you came in with a life-changing answer for me. It completely changed the way I thought about and analyze this. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you approach this question of what donations are appropriate and how that translates into impact.
Sure, and I remember that instance pretty well, and I also revert back to it sometimes in other conversations. But I really don't think it's up to us to decide what donations are appropriate for people, and oftentimes because I've built those relationships, I have conversations with the partners that we have, and oftentimes they're like, those fruits and vegetables are great, and all that produce is wonderful, but where's the meat? Or we like McDonald's too, or we like Pizza Hut too, and that got me to thinking a lot about uh just really allowing them to have a choice, to be able to decide whether or not this is a donation that's good for them, and not us saying, you know what, we're just going to create access for you to have healthy food that we want you to have. And I don't think that that's all right to dictate that on them. So partnering with these organizations that might offer what we deem as junk food, but giving our partners the option to yay or nay it, I think really creates a opportunity to allow them to have their keep their dignity in this process, to where they can still eat food that makes them feel good about themselves, that maybe reminds them of a treat they might have had when they were growing up, that their mother might have got them, or what I mean, a mother might have got their child or something like that. But keeping these options open, that and understanding that people are allowed to make a choice of whatever they want to eat. And if it's going to be thrown in the landfill, we have an obligation to make sure that we're keeping it from the landfill and getting it to people who can ultimately benefit from having it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think we talk enough about how that dignity is critical to the impact that we can have, and how choice is part of that, is part of dignity. Being able to have self-determination over what you eat is, yes, it's about having access to fruits and vegetables, but it's also about having access to pizza sometimes. I like pizza. I want pizza. I bet everybody on this call likes to eat pizza sometimes, or pick your quote unquote unhealthy food of choice, right? And those are part of what gives us a a rich dietary life, is having the ability to have all of those different choices. And because, again, we're rescuing a whole lot of food, that gives us the opportunity to make some of those, give people some of those choices to decide for themselves what their community wants and needs at any given time. And then I want to talk also about nutrition security and health outcomes. And this to me is really interesting, because we're hearing a lot now about food as medicine. It's in all of the headlines. There's panels on it at every conference, including ours coming up, because it's a hot button and it's a really important issue. And it's really an opportunity with food recovery to provide a lot of nutrition security along with food security, because we do have access to so many healthy fruits and vegetables. But I know that it's one thing to take a look at the national statistics, and a lot of us don't necessarily are able to access the health data of our constituents that we're serving, right? HIPAA laws, et cetera. But we do hear a lot of stories. We do have a lot of evidence that we are able to provide that impact. And I know you've got some great stories. So if you could talk a little bit about this.
Yes, I mean, I have some great stories, but I'm trying to figure out where you got these pictures from, because I was looking forever to find some good pictures, and I keep seeing all these pictures pop up. So that's
Karen,
great.
Karen is brilliant. But I can tell you that's from the rescue with the mayor last year.
Okay. Yeah. So, there I have a lot of different stories. And to me, that's where the impact really is it is in the stories. We talk a lot about the pounds, and everybody's always trying to have these pound goals, and that's great, but it doesn't tell the whole story. But for instance, there was a partner that I had been going to back when I was on the truck doing deliveries for, I don't know, for months, every single Friday. I was going months and months and months. So I was, building relationships with this particular partner, and it was the same resident volunteer at this location
It was a
for
senior high
months.
rise, right?
It was definitely a senior high rise, and I was, taking this food to this location week after week after week, having conversations with the people in the building. And I don't know, maybe after 4, 5, 6 months of delivering to this location, one of the residents, pulled me aside, and they were just telling me how grateful they were uh, for us bringing this fresh produce to the area, because they were on a fixed budget and, couldn't necessarily afford to uh, maintain buying fresh produce on a regular basis, and keep up with their medical bills and things like that. um, and then she disclosed that she had been diagnosed with cancer, and the doctor had said that she needed to change her diet and eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, and that would hopefully help her build up her immune system so her body could fight the cancer. And she had told me at this point, she said, I went back, I just recently had a doctor's appointment, and the doctor told me that the cancer in my body is like slowly dissipating, and it's way less than it was before you guys start bringing this stuff to our building. And she was almost in tears, and she was saying how grateful she was, because we were able to create this partnership and bring this fresh produce out there on a weekly basis. So, that's just one of the many stories that I have over the years of how we are actually impacting individuals in the community and helping them to not only reach their nutrition goals, but to reach their health goals.
Yeah. And oops. Uh, we hear those stories a lot. We get that feedback. We did research with a University of Pittsburgh professor who did both quantitative and qualitative data, and some of the stories she got about asking about health outcomes really echoed what you're saying, talking about the doctor says to control my blood pressure, I have to eat healthy, but I don't have healthy in my budget. But we're able to provide that sort of nutrition assistance, nutrition security for our partners to help them attack those social conditions of health. And then access. I talk a lot about this. If you've been on any of my webinars, you all probably heard me talk about this, but I will beat this drum into the ground. And that is with the amount of food that is able to be rescued with food recovery, it changes what access looks like because you have to find new places to distribute food. And I know a lot of folks on this call are doing that. So when you go out, and we know that we're doing that, right? But what does that mean? How does that translate into impact? And when you are out in the field on the front lines, Leland, what do you find out about this? What kind of impact does it have to make food accessible where people are?
I think the impact is really immeasurable because of how huge it is. And I hear from, from families of our partners and things like that at different organizations where they just don't have the time to do, the pickups at daycare and then go grocery shopping and then make it to the second shift at work. And so, us partnering with, after school programs, with family centers, with the housing authority, a lot of our partners, uh, where the people are actually at, where they're going to be. It definitely cuts down on transportation costs. It cuts down on time. It allows them to kill two birds with one stone, or three birds with one stone, so to speak, by being able to provide food at where they're going to be. So, it really increases the access exponentially for our partners and for our partners, community partners, in order to be able to, get the food into these spaces where we know they're going to be at. Even in the addition of one that's not on here is like the community fridges. That's a new thing well, it's new to
Yep.
me anyway, that they're starting to expand and grow, and there's money for the community fridges. That's even putting, things in space for people who may work a shift during the day and are not able to get to a pantry or get to one of these community partners, and they're able to get it after hours.
Yeah, that's actually a really great point. And those are a really good example of how taking these stories that you get when you drill down and learn about what your partners are experiencing, when you hear the stories, when you've built that trust to hear about it, allows you to innovate in a way that will increase impact. So creating a community fridge where people who are working, all during the hours where the access points might be open can get food after hours at 9 o'clock, at 11 o'clock at night, or whenever it is that they need to access it. So we have these amazing stories that you're getting through your relationship building, through that one-on-one relationship, right? And it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking of those stories as the feel good fodder for marketing, right? Or for fundraising. It's something that, oh, we got that story, great. We can use that to tell people what we're doing about and help us raise funds or help people understand the impact. But it can also be used to help us operationally and to help define our strategic direction. So I want to talk about then combining that with where we might traditionally look for insight into strategy. A lot of us are used to looking at data for strategy, for example. This is an example, a study that 412 Food Rescue did a couple years ago, where we looked at our current areas of coverage, which are blue, and then we overlaid GIS information on transit desert, food deserts, areas with high number of people living below the poverty line, and that had no charitable food source within a 15-minute walk. And we defined those as high need areas, right? So that's pure science, it's pure data. We're defining, okay, these areas are high need areas. But to really amp up impact, to increase impact, then we have to marry that with all of that experience that you're getting out in the community by getting that on the ground information and building that trust. And so if you can talk about how we then take those two approaches to create a strategy and define a strategy for creating impact in those areas in red.
Certainly. So, there were, I think we had identified maybe 13 high needs areas, in this study, and we took the approach of attacking them, head on and looking in the communities and seeing where people were going, whether that was community centers, whether that was churches, wherever it might be, where people were going. We tried to partner with with those individual spaces, and we tried to create. Well, let's say I tried to create in these spaces partnerships with those organizations to create food distribution hubs is what we kind of identified them as. And we were extremely successful in some of the areas, maybe not as successful in other areas, but uh you know being able to consistently get food into these spaces where people were going to be anyway really helped to kind of mitigate some of that food insecurity in a lot of these areas.
And so that is how you create a strategy using both that qualitative information and that quantitative information. And probably everybody on this call is already doing some pieces of both of those. But the key is to marry them together, right? To put them together, to be able to map out then what your 12-month strategy looks like for really drilling down and making sure that the food that we're getting and the effort that we're putting into this has the impact that we want it to have, right? And this is, I don't know why, but this is something that always just I need to remind myself of. But that sort of planning and strategy and then execution is something that you can also take to the bank, so to speak, take to funders and show that you are approaching your work super thoughtfully and that you are really really putting in the work to make sure that their investment dollars are well spent, right? That they can't do better than investing in your organization. You're doing everything that you need to do in order to make sure that your impact is targeted and amplified. And you can see that that taking that strategy allowed us to really amplify our reach in the types of areas that were being underserved. And then if you turn that around, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, so if you don't have any stories, but what is the feedback you get in those high need areas? Can you think of any of the partners that we serve that are in some of those areas and what it has meant to them in order to partner with us?
Absolutely. So like just like in a lot of this, man, there's a lot of stories that I do have. One specifically, uh, I'll reference I'll reference my days on the truck as well, because I had a lot more connectivity with not only our partner organizations but also with the people in the community when I was out there. And one of the things that was said was, I think it was from a mother of maybe 3 or 4, and she she worked, she had a morning job and she had a night job, and she had very little time in between, in which she had to pick her child up from daycare, then drop her child off at her mother's house or sister's house, somebody's house, who was going to watch them while she went on the second shift of work. And she had the limited time to be able to go grocery shopping and to do some things. So one of the organizations that we partnered with, I think it happened to be a family center, and we were doing a big food distribution that day. She happened to be out there, and I was on the truck, and she was like so thankful, because she wasn't sure, how she was going to make it all happen within the time restraints that she had that day. But her happened to be there, picking up her child at the same time that we were, there with the truck. It kind of like it minimized a lot of that ripping and running that she had to do, and allowed her to be able to pick her kid up, grab some food, and then get her, her child to the next person who was going to be watching her child while she went to her second shift to work. So that's just one of many stories, again. And it really informs the work that we do and allows us to continue pushing the needle because we can see the impact. And, people are letting us know the impact that we're having directly on them.
Yeah. And each one of those stories is a data point, right? It's 1 point in that percentage of people reached here in this graph. So it's not just a feel good story. It is part of that impact, that increase in impact that we want to have, that is really important to us as an organization. And with that, I'm going to actually, we'll turn it over to questions. I'm going to stop sharing for now. I'll talk a little bit about the conference at the end of the webinar. I see lots of comments in the comment section. So questions. Yeah, we have one question here in the Q&A. How long did the GIS dashboard take to create? Are there any resources that go into detail on how this was created and what it includes? We actually partnered with outside researchers to do that. You could do it internally if you have somebody that is good with GIS, but it was not a skill set that we had. And even now that we do have somebody that I think could manage it, it takes a lot of time to put together that information, and it was better resourced out. What we did, we just used publicly available data sets on poverty rates, transportation. What else did I say? I don't remember what else they were. Well, whatever they were. I could tell you, if you email me, I can tell you what the layers were, but we took all of those publicly available data sets, and then we uploaded charitable food locations that included not just our locations, but also food pantries, although we work with, I think, almost all the food pantries, but any charitable food source, whether it was ours or not. We just put those in a spreadsheet and uploaded those to GIS as well. And it was easy for us to then identify areas that did not have any food source within a 15-minute walk shed. So if you've got the GIS skills, it's really not very difficult to do. Yeah, okay. What other questions can we answer? I saw somebody in the chat say in Germany, they also provide folks with non-food, including flowers. I do love that. I think, isn't there a flower rescue organization around Leland? Are you aware?
I know we rescue flowers from one of our Trader Joe's locations often. So I don't know if there's an organization that's specifically geared towards that, but I know that's one of the locations that we do rescue flowers from.
Yeah, and providing individuals with the things that they need for a meaningful life is important. And you talked about non-food. It's absolutely critical to make sure that people have access to toothpaste and soap and all of those other things that are necessary. With food recovery, we really focus on things that will be thrown away, especially food that will go bad. That's why 85% of what we rescue is perishable. But we do get non-food items, and it is important to make sure those get out into the community. Scent of Love or something. Yes. Scent with Love. That is a local flower recovery organization here. I see some questions are in the chat. I'm having trouble keeping up with them. So if you drop them into the Q&A, that's a little bit easier. Somebody asked, okay, your point about reaching people wherever they are available is crucial. Some food safety guidelines and regulations communicated by regional food banks, such as Feeding America or End Feeding America, sometimes make it hard for such solutions to be implemented. For example, food needs to be distributed in a locked space with personnel attending. How do you navigate and deal with those regulations?
I mean, that's a good question. I have not necessarily had a lot of those barriers with some of our partners. We typically, outside of the free fridges that we don't police. Uh, we typically, make sure that our partners go through a serve safe food handlers certification, and make sure they know how to properly store, and they know all the rules and regulations that comes with handling food, to make sure and ensure that they're distributing safe food. So that's our number one approach to making sure that it's safe. But then also, we kind of, once we train them, we trust our organizations to be able to handle the distributions in a safe manner.
And we don't, many of our organizations aren't Feeding America locations. Most of them aren't. So that's how we get around that, is that we do work with food banks and food pantries in the area that are affiliated, but the majority of our partners are not Feeding America distribution locations, and they don't have those same regulations. And as Leland said, we work to make sure that they understand food handler best practices, that there's sorry, my brain got ahead of my mouth there, to make sure that they know how to handle food safely. But it's up to them to create the procedures within their nonprofit for distributing that food. We work with them. Leland's done a lot of work on helping them figure out what are best practices there, but it's up to them. And so we don't have those same guidelines. What other metrics do you use to measure impact beyond poundage? For example, level of food security, number of days in which food needs are met, et cetera.
So that's a good question. I have actually a great, I don't know if it's a story or if it's a data point or what, but early on in our partnership with I believe the Housing Authority, City of Pittsburgh. I think early on they had like a fund that they were putting together to make sure that the people in the communities they serve had food when they got those emergency food calls. And then we began a partnership with them, and we started taking food to their communities. And it got to a point where they were no longer getting these calls, those emergency calls for food, because we were making sure that there were food in each of their housing locations at such a regular basis that the food insecurity rate literally went down in those communities. So and I think in response they ended up donating the money that they typically raise for that food. They donated it to us for our efforts in helping to eradicate food insecurity in the housing authority. So I think that's one of the ways that we measure impact individually within, from organization to organization, is that level of food insecurity starting to go down within the organization and the communities that they serve.
Yeah, we also look at our environmental impact. That's really important. Our mission is both tackling food waste and the environmental impact that it has, as well as making sure that we impact food insecurity and nutrition insecurity. And so we look at the amount of CO2 equivalent that we are preventing from going into a landfill as well. And that's why when we talked early on about creating that trustful environment with your nonprofit partners, that's really important, because we want to make sure that we really are keeping food out of a landfill. That is critical. We want to be able to claim with confidence that we've mitigated X amount of CO2. And so recognizing that every human being is going to occasionally throw away food in their house or whatever, it's important to us to make sure that when we serve a nonprofit, we're not creating garbage for them, because that impacts our environmental sustainability as well. I saw somebody ask about what percentage of government funding we get, and I will tell you 412 Food Rescue gets almost none. We have a partnership. We had a partnership during the pandemic with Allegheny County, where we received funding from them to purchase meals from restaurants and deliver those to the organizations that we served. But other than that, we get and I think our partnership with HACP, now we get some funding from them for our grocery bagging program, but we get no government funding otherwise. It's all private philanthropy and individual giving. Are there other questions that are in the chat that I missed? if there are, if you want to either retype them or drop them into the chat again so I can see them. I am going to drop some links into the chat as well. And I'm going to talk about the conference for a second. So next month, as I mentioned, we are not having a webinar. Instead, we are hosting the Food Rescue Conference. It's our third year in a row of hosting it. It is that was the formatting on that message that I just dropped in there is terrible. I apologize. So the Food Rescue Hero Conference is designed to provide actionable information for food recovery organizations. We are different from the other conferences you might attend in that we are all virtual, and every session is designed to bring you specific information that you can use to grow your food recovery organization. And they range from sessions with foundations and on fundraising to as I mentioned, food is medicine, talking about how to think about and implement that within your organization, as well as other operationally focused sessions. So that is happening at the end of October, October 24th and 25th. For our folks in California and across the country for whom it will be early when it starts because it is on Eastern time, we are going to hopefully have the morning sessions online that day, so you can start watching live at noon and then watch the morning sessions after that recorded. We will on October 24th on Thursday be live streaming starting at 1 o'clock. So we will have sessions that are we're all in the room together instead of just on Zoom. So that'll be something new this year. And as I said, I've dropped the link to register for that into the chat. And also, let's see, what has the pitch process been or marketing that's helped the organization reach individual donors and private philanthropists and convert them into supporters? That is a great question. So I'll tell you, first off, I'm going to tell you that we're actually going to talk about some of this at the conference. So it's a great reason to attend the conference. We also have done some webinars in the past where we go into this. I think the key thing to remember is, well, two things. First, who are you pitching to and what is their interest? Are they interested in addressing food security? Are they interested in addressing environment, or are they interested in hearing about both of them? Because you kind of want to focus in on that. And then the second thing is, and this is especially true for funders who are interested in food security, is you need to focus in on what's different about food recovery from other solutions. So it's not an or. We're not asking them to fund us or the food bank. It's food banks and food rescue working together to create one comprehensive solution, but they need to understand why funding of food recovery is not duplicative. There are many things about food recovery that are very different, including that access that we just talked about, that Leland mentioned so much, and that percentage of fresh food that you're distributing. 85% of the food that we rescue and distribute is fresh food. Some months it's even more. And a lot of that is produce. And so you really want to hone in on what are the differences between food recovery and other solutions out there, and what do you bring to your community that's additive. And that is key. Otherwise, they're going to throw you in the pile with all of the other food pantries or food banks and think, okay, well, which one of these am I going to fund? We have most of our panelists confirmed already. Somebody asked if we had all of our panelists confirmed, but if somebody has a session to propose, we may have a slot or two. There's oftentimes some last minute give and take. So please feel free to send it to me. That way, if something does come up, I won't be scrambling. Right. If there are no other questions, I think we can probably wrap up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, Leland, so much. engagement in the community is always really inspiring. You bring so much passion to it and so much dedication, and I always learn something when I talk to you. So thank you for being on this webinar with us, and thanks everybody for attending. All right. Bye, everyone.